Aloha class. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about vulnerabilities. This is going to be chapter 1.2, vulnerability discussion. So we're going to open up our text, our zyBooks text. Give me just a second here. And we're going to look at, here we go. We're going to be looking today at security vulnerabilities. So let's talk about what is a vulnerability first. I'd like to be able to do this question and answer when I ask you, hey, what do you think a vulnerability is? Have you answer, but unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity right now. Uh, we didn't get to go through this really deeply yesterday, but a vulnerability you can think of as a weakness. For example, a vulnerability as defined here, it's a weakness or flaw in a system's design, implementation, operation, or management. So an example of a weakness or a vulnerability would be when you buy a router, when you buy that piece of equipment that you're going to use at home to give everybody access to the internet, there's usually a default password and a username that goes with it. So to give you an example, if I was to go over here and type in default username and password for Linksys router, you'll see that we have admin or left blank, and the default password is admin. That's a common one for Linksys. You can go in here and do this for other types. If you want to do D-Link and see what D-Link routers are, the password is often blank, admin and blank. So you can see that you've got a vulnerability here, and that a lot of people that buy these routers or put them in their home, they're not computer savvy. So they're going to go out there, buy a router, stick it in their home, and they're going to leave it just like that. So if you happen to be in the neighborhood, you have connection, you can grab their internet connection. Uh, you know, I'm not suggesting you do this, and I'm actually telling you not to do this. I'm just saying that bad actors, bad people out there can exploit that. So that gets back to what we're talking about over here. So a vulnerability is that weakness or flaw, and a threat is any event that can potentially impact the system negatively through unauthorized access, destruction, disclosure, modification of data, and or denial of service. So um, a threat is, somebody or something that can exploit that vulnerability. So we were just talking about that default password. That's the vulnerability. So a hacker could exploit that through just going in there and did do what I did, which is Google, get the default username and password, and use that to break into the system. And this is something that happens a lot more than you would want to know. This is amazing when you look at case studies out there of hacking breaches and things like that, because there are a lot of breaches out there. There's a lot of breaches that happen, and sometimes you'll see that it came down to somebody left default username and password on a router, on a piece of equipment, on a server, something like that, and they're able to get in. It's crazy. And IoT devices, the Internet of Thing devices, when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about things like, let's say your watch. Your watch is considered Internet of Things. Anything that connects, like your light bulbs, maybe. Some people have refrigerators that are smart. All these devices, have vulnerabilities or could possibly have vulnerabilities in them. So, um, so when we're talking about threats here, the things that can exploit the vulnerabilities, things that can, use that vulnerability against the system, those threats can be accidental. So it could be software or operator error that ends up in accidentally, you doing something through that vulnerability. It could be intentional. It could be like a virus or a ransomware or phishing. We haven't talked about phishing or ransomware, but you may be aware of that. Viruses, people are pretty aware of. It's software that infects, your computer. It usually attaches to a certain type of file, and then it spreads. You've got ransomware, which is a type of malware that's going to lock up your system and not let you use it until you put in a certain code. Usually, you have to buy Bitcoin and send that to some nefarious actor, and then they will give you the code to unlock it. Maybe, you never know. you're handing over your money and you're not sure if you'll get a response or not. And the other is phishing. And phishing is where people try, this is a social engineering thing, where people try to get you to click on things in email or maybe text messages. So we'll talk about that later. Another threat is a natural threat. Earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, tsunamis like we just had. Those are all threats. They can, let's say, you wouldn't think of this maybe as a security problem, but let's say that you had an office down at the natatorium and, near the ocean, and you had files that are stored down there on a server. And let's say we had a tsunami, and the tsunami would it would inundate the whole area, and it kills the server, and the hard drive is toast at this point. That could be a threat. The vulnerability was that you only had that one server and that one copy of the data, and it was in a place that was in low elevation. So natural disasters can wreak havoc. Then they can be the threat. So the next thing we talk about is threat actors, and I think I used the term earlier. A threat actor is a person or a group that's going to exploit that vulnerability. So threat is, an event or whatever that can potentially, do negative things using or exploiting that vulnerability. The threat actor is the person or group that's going to be doing that actively. So when we look at the participation activity here, you can see vulnerability threat actor. So this is the bad guy over here in red. We're going to click on start, and you can see an attacker sends an employee an email with an attachment containing a virus. Here's your little virus in there, bug-looking thing. And then you click on this, and the vulnerability is the employee without adequate security training because he's not been taught to look out for these kinds of things. So he is now the vulnerability. And the threat is going to be the virus itself, because that is the thing that's going to exploit the vulnerability, which is our person that doesn't, have the training. And then the threat actor is going to be the attacker over here, the red guy. So this is, how you should view threats, vulnerabilities, and threat actors. And we get into problems here. I'll let you do this on your own. But the nice thing about Zybooks is it's using actual events here. And this is really cool because we're not just talking about theoretical at this point. When you're talking about like threat actors and everything else, it's like, okay, I guess I get the concept. But then you look in here, they're telling you actual instances. So HB Gary SQL injection attack. An SQL injection attack is like when you go somewhere, let's say we'll go to Google, well, right here, Google. So if you were to type in on just a regular web page, most web pages out there have search areas. So you go in here and you type in your search term. So when you go to do that, the really interesting thing is this gets handled on the back end by some kind of usually it's they're doing a search. They're going to compare it with what they have in their database. So it's going to be accessing the database. So believe it or not, even in this modern day, there are companies that have websites where uh, they don't actually go through the input strings and clean them before they do a search on it. So I'll type in here what normally happens. So what normally happens when you put in a search term like this is it will use whatever you put in here as part of your database search. So you'll have an SQ, what we call an SQL uh, query that runs against the database that's going to see, hey, do we have anything like this to hand them? And they will, on the next page, maybe show you 5 hits on that search term that you used. So some people will come in here and do something tricky. They will try to hack. So let me just show you like an SQL statement. So an SQL statement would look like select star from employees where salary is greater than 1,000, or we can just use 1,000. So that's what a query would look like. So what this is saying is simply saying it's select everything from the employees table, because databases are tables of information, where the salary, and salary is a field. So within a table, think of it like an Excel document. If you think of a spreadsheet, just one sheet in an Excel document as a table, then one of the fields would be one of the columns, like salary would be one of the columns. So in this, we're saying select everything from employees where salary is greater than 1,000. So what they'll do in an SQL injection attack is kind of cool. What they'll do is let's say if you were letting the user specify what the amount was, you would put something in here. Uh, your SQL statement would probably look like something. They would have it in programming. They'd say something like SQL equals this. And for here, instead of that, they would just have, and I'm just using pseudocode because I don't know what language we would be using on the back end. But I'd just say like SQL equals uh, amount given. And when I say amount given, I mean given through this, this search that we're doing. So they would just substitute in the value from here, whatever somebody typed in. So if they're gonna just grab this and put it in there directly, somebody can play around and they can put in a value for this amount given through this thing. They can put an amount that will actually terminate that search and then do something else. So what they could do is they could put in for their search here, they would do something like this, to end the thing, put in maybe a comma to say, okay, now we're going to do a next command. And they can do a drop all, type of thing. And that's going to basically drop all the tables from it. So they can erase your database, or they could pull all the stuff out of it using SQL commands to do that. So the thing I want you to understand about SQL injection attack is it's ways of using like a website's input area. Like if you go to anywhere in any website, let's say Amazon, if we went to Amazon.com, and when we went in here and we did a search, we could do a search on something like, dog toys. But that's what normal people would do. But, if a hacker went in here, they would try doing something like this and start typing in drop, all, something like that, something to try to hack the database on the back end. So that's the SQL injection attack, and that's kind of how it works. So you don't need to know any of this detail. All you really need to know is the SQL injection attack that they're referencing here is just where somebody goes into a standard search or something like that on a website, and they try to put in some SQL coding to make it do something bad on the back end where it deals with the database. Because the data from your website is often pulled from a database. And what this is trying to do is it's trying to manipulate that by putting in things. So if you're not checking, if the programmer that made this doesn't check the values that get put in here, and make sure that there's no nefarious commands in there. If they don't check that, then they can be hacked. So that's something to keep in mind. So the cool thing is over here, they tell you about this. So they say in 2011, the hacker group Anonymous, which a lot of people have heard about, carried out an SQL injection attack on an IT firm called HB Gary. The attack was successful because HB Gary's website did not validate the input. So that means they didn't check the input that they put into that into that search box. So Anonymous published the company's internal emails, destroyed data, and defaced the company website. So yeah, once you get an injection attack, you can do all kinds of things. And we'll talk about this later, but one of the techniques that they have is once you get access, you pivot within the system and try to find other vulnerabilities. And one thing leads to another. In this case, they defaced the website, they destroyed data, and they also were able to get into the mail server and put all that mail out there for people to see. So that's obviously not a good thing. So it's very important that security is, understood by people at all levels, the programmers, the people that work in the company, a lot of different things here. So in this situation, the vulnerability, what was the vulnerability? Was it the hacker group Anonymous? No, they were the threat actor. Was it the no put input validation? Ding, 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 ding. That's correct. And the threat was the SQL injection. So I'll let you go through these. I basically gave you all the answers there. But you can click on the right answer and then go and click on a wrong answer and just see what the see why the answers are wrong or right. So the impact of vulnerability exploitations. Um, yeah, we're talking about data breaches here. So when a threat actor exploits a vulnerability, the danger is that some information that they shouldn't have, confidential information basically may be exposed. So a data breach is the exposure of that data to somebody that shouldn't be able to see it. So data breach may include data loss or data exfiltration. So data exfiltration, that's a nice big word. It sounds really fancy. And all it means is people got information out of there. So when you're a hacker and you get into a system, the way you get information out of it, things that are worthwhile to steal, when you're going in there and you want to get data out, like let's say salary data or something like that, we say exfiltration. That means you pull it out of somewhere. So that data exfiltration is just, it means that they were able to, get, information out of the system. So, so you've got data loss because they can go in there and damage stuff, or they could exfiltrate data. They could, remove it, or make a copy of it and bring it back. So that's something you have to worry about. So data breaches can result in identity theft. Uh, I don't know if you've had any worries about identity theft. Usually people that don't have credit scores yet aren't in that much danger, but that's not actually 100% true. You should worry about identity theft no matter what your age is, because somebody can get your social security number and use that to apply for work or other things. There's the risk of financial loss. There's the risk of reputational damage. Imagine you're a company out there that everybody trusts and you get hacked because you don't have good security. Who's going to trust you after that? How many customers are you going to lose because nobody trust you anymore? Availability loss. You've got employees or customers. They may not be able to, do what they need to do for their job. What if it's a doctor at a hospital and all of a sudden, somebody's exploited a weakness and they've broken in and, gummed up the system so they can't access the patient records. You got a patient on the operating table and you don't have his records. That's a big problem. That's a big issue because it's not just availability loss there. There could be all kinds of liability. There can be all kinds of, if somebody gets hurt from that, there's all kinds of lawsuits that could come out of that. So these data breaches can have big impacts. So I want you to keep that in mind. And I showed you this before, but there's a great website out there called Have I Been Pwned? And you can see the URL here, Have I Been Pwned? You can, it's based on an old Ashton Kutcher phrase, pwned, TV show that he had. But if you go in there, you can type in your email address. Have your parents do this. This would be a great thing. Have your parents go in there and type in their address. I worked at a Japanese company for about 30 years, and I had this email address which no longer exists. And I would click on check and I was amazed to find out that I'd been, and because I had this for almost 30 years, I've been in 17 data breaches, and it will tell you in here exactly what kind of data breaches you were in, and what kind of data was compromised. So in this one, it tells you how it happened and everything. Twitter, back in 23, they got email addresses, names, social media profiles, usernames. So that's dangerous. If they got passwords and usernames, they can use an attack called credential stuffing, where they automate the process of going to, let's say, 1,000 different websites and trying out your username and password there because people use the same username and password, which they shouldn't. But they automate this thing, so they'll go out there and check 1,000 different websites in an instant just to see, hey, did it work there? And if it did, wow, we just got another piece of information on this person. So they can slowly get access to all your stuff and your identity, and that's why you want to be very careful. You want to have good cyber hygiene. So a lot of these companies, when they're hacked in the old days, when they were hacked, you would get notifications. And I remember when Adobe was hacked, and I think I'm in the Adobe hack in here somewhere. Yeah, Adobe. They did allow the customers to have a year of credit monitoring to make sure that your credit scores weren't being hurt. So making sure that nobody was taking out loans or credit cards in your name. So use a tool like this, haveibeenpwned.com, to actually check and see, has your email address been the subject of some kind of a data breach? So this is really helpful. You with student email addresses probably not going to turn up on here, but ask your parents to try it. See how your parents, and this could help them out too, to let them see where they've been, compromised. So getting back to our thing here, we're going to go ahead and click on Start. So in 2021, an attacker hacked into T-Mobile's internal system through an unprotected router. Remember, I said default usernames and passwords? There we go. So somebody got in through one of T-Mobile's routers. So T-Mobile experienced a data breach because the attacker gained access to the servers that store the customer information. So they were able to go in through the router and they got to the servers. T-Mobile experienced data exfiltration because the attacker copied the customer information that they found. The attacker listed that customer information for sale on the dark web. So the dark web, if you haven't heard about it, we go to sites that are on the regular World Wide Web, but there is a dark web out there. And the dark web, the only way to get to it is to use the Tor Onion server, or well, Tor Onion network in order to access it. But it's a uh, I wouldn't say highly secure anymore, but it's a relatively secure way of going out there and doing things and using servers so that it can't be easily traced. I'll just put it that way. I'm trying to figure out the proper way of terming this, but there are a lot of sites that host illegal activity and illegal sales and all kinds of stuff. And in the past 10, 20 years ago, there was a lot of talk about all kinds of things where people would be buying drugs over the dark web. They were hiring hits on people, assassinations, things like that. There was a lot of different, and I think that still goes on today even. Recently, President Trump, uh, he he commuted the sentence of somebody that was arrested for, I think it was the Silk Road. I'm not sure exactly, but there was a famous person that was arrested for running one of these massive websites that were doing all kinds of bad things, and he just got I think it was a pardon actually, not a commutation. So yeah, there's a fascinating history of these companies on the dark web. The federal agents will, try to figure out who's who and then bring people to justice, but it's very difficult with all the anonymizing of accounts and things like that. It's hard to do, but they have done an impressive job so far. Anyway, getting back to what we were talking about here. So the attacker listed this customer information for sale on the dark web. So he took the information, put it out there for sale, said, "Hey, I've got so many customers, this kind of information," and people buy that information in order to do things like, identity theft. So, or make, credit cards in a person's name, things like that. And you can buy on the dark web, you can also buy credit cards that may or may not be good, credit card numbers and people's information on it. So yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff out there. So T-Mobile customers may continue to experience identity theft because the customer's information is still circulating on the dark web. So once that information's out there, you know, it's out there. Um, if they're selling it, if they can shut down a person, fine, great, they shut it down, but somebody has that information. And if it's a digital copy, they can easily make another digital copy and send it to somebody else. So it's still possible that people can get hacked from that. So yeah, so T-Mobile experienced financial loss because T-Mobile was sued by affected customers, as they should have been. T-Mobile agreed to pay the affected customers $350 million, invest $150 million in security improvements. So yeah, when you look at this, you see that it cost them a lot of money, and then they had to spend a lot of money to do things they should have done anyway. So yeah, this is how companies learn through being punished this way. Um, and then we have another great example, a Colonial Pipeline attack. A lot of you are old enough to remember that one. So that was only 4 years ago. You're probably a little bit too young to remember. But in 2021, a hacker group called DarkSide attacked Colonial Pipeline using ransomware. So DarkSide blocked access to their billing operations and demanded almost $4.5 million. So the pipeline was shut down for a whole week while Colonial Pipeline paid the ransom and attempted to restore the billing operations. And it was rough going too. I remember it in the news, and they were having trouble getting back up online. So the shutdown resulted in gas shortages across the East Coast of the United States. What happens when you have a shortage? So I don't know if you've taken economics yet, but when you have not enough of something, the price of it goes up. So unfortunately, that resulted in higher gas prices for a while for people. So there are a lot of impacts from these things. So, and they did pay the $4.4 million ransom. And there's a lot of debate on whether or not people should, because if people keep paying the ransoms, then the bad actors are going to keep on going out there. It goes back to the old, there's an old saying, there was a bank robber, I think it was John Dillinger maybe, that somebody asked him at one point, why do you rob the banks? And he said, that's where the money is. So if there's money in doing these bad things, people keep doing them. But if companies decide, no, we're not going to pay it, then there's less likelihood that people will be willing to do these attacks. That being said, if they bring enough pain against that company, by shutting down their operations so that it's costing them a lot more money not to pay the ransom, a lot of these companies are just going to do, they're going to pay these ransoms. So that's why we have that continuing problem. So that's essentially vulnerabilities and threats. I hope that the content I'm giving you, even though this runs a little bit longer, I think that kind of giving you a little bit of information and background gives it a little bit of flavor and makes it a little bit easier to understand. So let me know in the comments down below whether you think that's worthwhile or whether I should just stick with the material and not really give the asides, because I don't know what I don't know what your preferences are. So let me know and I will go ahead and modify that to your liking. So that's it for this lesson. I will see you in the next lesson. Have a great day. Aloha.